Utah, late autumn of 2004. The mountains around Wasatch County stand heavy with early frost, their edges turning from gold to bare gray as winter pushes quietly across the valley. The nights grow longer, sharper, and the small communities tucked between the hills begin to retreat indoors, settling into the slow rhythm of cold weather. Inside these quiet streets, life moves gently, without noise or disruption, which is why what happened on the evening of November 18th, 2004, left the entire county shaken in a way no one expected. 40-1-year-old Marina Lowell was a familiar face to many. A mother, a neighbor, a woman whose calm nature made people feel at ease the moment they spoke to her. She worked as a textile specialist for a small handcrafted fabric shop in Midway, the kind of store that still used traditional weaving looms and specialized in custom work for local clients. Marina loved details, colors, and texture. She loved watching threads come together into patterns. She loved solving small creative challenges. People admired her patience, her discipline, and her gentle warmth. She lived alone with her young son Eldon, who had just turned 10. Eldon was quiet like his mother. He liked drawing, photography, and riding his bike along the narrow roads behind their home. Friends often said Eldon was Marina's shadow where she went. He followed. The two were inseparable. Thursday evenings were usually peaceful for them. Marina never worked late on Thursdays. She always came home early, started dinner, helped Eldon with homework, and finished her sewing projects at the kitchen table before bed. The same routine, steady and comforting. Nothing unpredictable. Nothing risky, but routines, no matter how strong, can be broken in one moment. That Thursday, Marina left work at 6:04 p.m. A co-worker recalled seeing her step outside with her scarf wrapped tightly around, her shoulders and 2 fabric rolls tucked under her arm. She waved, said she was looking forward to making Eldon's favorite soup, and walked toward her car. She never made it home. At 7:26 p.m., Eldon called their neighbor, Sylvia, asking if she had seen his mother. His voice trembled. He said Marina was always home by 6:30. Always. Sylvia tried to calm him, telling him maybe Marina had stopped for groceries or gas. But Eldon said he had already called the store she usually visited. No one had seen her. Within an hour, Sylvia alerted authorities. Deputies arrived at Marina's house just before 9 p.m. They found the kitchen light on, a pot of water sitting on the stove, and Eldon curled on the couch hugging one of Marina's handmade blankets. He kept asking the same question over and over. Where is she? She never leaves without telling me. Officers drove the main route Marina used on her way home. Nothing. No stalled car. No sign of a crash. No tire marks. No dropped groceries. It was as if she simply vanished. The search widened overnight. The sheriff's office sent patrol units across the county roads. Volunteers combed through nearby empty lots. The next morning, helicopters scanned the foothills. Still nothing. On the third day, something finally surfaced. A jogger reported a car partially hidden near a trail turnout by the Provo River, about 8 miles south of where Marina lived. The car matched the model deputies were searching for. When officers arrived, they confirmed it Marina's vehicle, a navy blue 1998 Toyota sedan. One of the rear doors was slightly open. Inside, her purse sat on the passenger seat. Her keys were missing. Her phone lay on the floor under the dashboard. Cracked that there was no sign of Marina. Investigators immediately treated it as suspicious. The car's condition didn't suggest an accident. There was no front-end damage, no skid marks, no sign Marina tried to brake or swerve. It looked instead like someone had intentionally parked it there. The first major clue came from a single, muddy footprint on the backseat floor. It was too large to be Marina's, too heavy, too deep. Deputies made casts of the impression and sent them for analysis, but without a suspect to compare it to. The prints meant little. Fear settled over Wasatch County like an icy fog. Detective Leland Cross, known for his meticulous nature, was assigned to lead the case. Cross was not a man who rushed. He didn't chase theories. Instead, he built them brick by brick. For him, each detail mattered, and in Marina's case, the details were few. Too few. He spoke to her co-workers, nothing unusual. He interviewed her neighbors, no suspicious cars, no strange visitors. He questioned Eldon, who only remembered that Marina left work exactly on time, like she always did, and that she told him she'd be home before sunset. Cross-checked the fabric shop's security cameras. Marina stepped out, smiled at someone inside, adjusted her scarf, unlocked her car, and drove off. No one followed. No one approached her. No one else stood in the frame. It was a clean disappearance, but clean never means innocent. When Cross examined Marina's car, he noticed something odd. On the back seat, under the fabric rolls she had brought home for work, there was a faint indentation, shallow, long, and narrow, almost like something had been placed there, then removed. Cross asked the shop owner if the fabric rolls had been placed in her car at work. The owner confirmed Marina had carried them herself. So what made the indentation? And why was it only noticeable under the fabric? Then came the most alarming detail: on the trunk's carpet. Investigators found fibers from a thick rope, blue and white twisted nylon, fresh enough that it had likely been moved within hours of the disappearance. Yet no rope was found inside the car. It suggested that someone had transported something, or someone using that rope. The search expanded for weeks. Detectives scoured the forests near the river. They looked inside sheds, under bridges, through abandoned shacks. They questioned local hunters, fishermen, hikers, anyone who might have seen something unusual. But with winter approaching fast, the river grew colder, and the snow grew deeper. Marina's case went cold before Christmas. Eldon moved in with his aunt. He refused to unpack Marina's boxes. He told her he wanted them to stay exactly how they were until Marina came home. Years passed. Detective Cross retired in 2012, still tormented by the case he couldn't solve. Marina's file remained in the cold case unit, thick with notes, thin on clues. Her face still hung on the bulletin board faded edges. A hopeful smile. It was the kind of case that haunted people for 12 years. Nothing changed then, in 2016. A new cold case detective named Adrian Knox reopened Marina's file. Knox was known for digging into old evidence with new eyes. He reviewed the footprint, the fibers, the car position, the rope traces, the indentation on the back seat, all pieces that once looked disconnected. But the real breakthrough came from something simple: a change in technology. The rope, unmatchable, could now be analyzed through advanced polymer testing developed after 2010, when Knox submitted the fibers. They were matched to a very specific manufacturer of industrial marine rope, used in only 2 places in Utah at that time. One was a rafting supply company. The other was a private workshop owned by a man named Garen Pike. Pike had lived in the area. In 2004, he had a criminal history, and most importantly, he had lived only a mile from where Marina's car had been found. Knox dug deeper. Pike had moved out of state in 2007. He had worked odd jobs: construction, repair work, outdoor labor. In 2004, he owned the exact type of rope the fibers came from. But the most alarming piece: he had once been questioned about trespassing near the fabric shop where Marina worked. It was enough for investigators to request a deeper file review. They searched Pike's old storage locker in Colorado after obtaining legal clearance. Inside, they found a pair of hiking boots wrapped in newspaper dated 2004. The tread matched the footprint from Marina's car. The cold case was no longer cold, and the rest of the truth darker. Deeper and long-hidden would finally surface. The discovery of the boots changed everything. It shifted Marina Lowell's case from a distant memory buried in the cold case unit to the center of a renewed investigation. The tread matched perfectly down to the cracked heel and the uneven left side, where details that could only come from the same boot that stepped onto the back seat of Marina's car the night she vanished. Detective Adrian Knox held the boot in his hands as the storage locker's fluorescent lights flickered overhead. Dust coated every corner, untouched for years. Pike had abandoned the locker in 2008, leaving behind scraps of his life like he wanted to outrun them. Old tools, stained tarps, rusted fishing equipment, and those boots. Knox carefully packaged them, feeling his pulse sharpen. There was no guarantee the match would hold up in court, but it was enough to open the door to a deeper look into Garen Pike's life. Pike had left Utah barely 3 years after Marina's disappearance. He'd floated between states: Colorado, Nevada, Wyoming, taking seasonal jobs and living quietly in rented rooms and motels. He had no spouse, no children, no long-term friends. He stayed off social media. He moved often. It was as if he was always preparing to leave before anyone could notice him. Knox ran his name through every available database. Pike had been arrested twice: once for trespassing on federal land in 1999, another time for possession of burglary tools in 2003, but never charged with anything violent. Still, his pattern was there. The kind of pattern that hides beneath the surface until someone connects the pieces. Investigators pulled old property records and found something striking. In 2004, Pike rented a small cabin on the edge of a wooded area less than a mile from where Marina's car was found. That cabin had been demolished years ago, but aerial photographs from that time showed a footpath leading from the cabin's back door toward the trailhead where Marina's vehicle was located. Knox felt the weight of it tightening. The rope fibers, the boots, the cabin, the proximity. It was no longer a loose collection of coincidences. It was becoming a map. He gathered his findings and brought them to the Wasatch County District Attorney. The DA reviewed the evidence for hours, flipping through pages, listening to Knox lay out the narrative. When he finished, the DA leaned back, exhaled slowly, and said the words that Knox had been waiting 12 years to hear. "Let's move forward. We're reopening the case formally, and we're bringing Pike back to Utah." An arrest warrant was issued. Pike was living in rural Nevada at the time, working at a small boat repair yard. When local authorities arrived, Pike didn't resist. He didn't ask questions. He simply nodded once, turned, and placed his hands behind his back. It was an eerie calm, same kind investigators often saw in people who had expected this moment for a long time. News of Pike's arrest hit Utah within hours. People who had lived through 2004 remembered the search, the posters, the fear that gripped the valley. Marina's name appeared in headlines again. Residents shared stories about her kindness on community forums. Some left flowers outside the old fabric shop. After years of silence, the hope for answers returned. Knox drove to Eldon Lowell, now 22, and living in Provo, to tell him personally. Eldon opened the door with a cautious look, as if he'd been waiting for news his entire life, but didn't know whether to welcome it or brace for it. Knox told him everything: the new forensic technology, the rope fibers, the boots, the evidence leading to Pike. Eldon stood still, gripping the doorway as if it were the only thing keeping him upright. When Knox finished, Eldon quietly said, "I always knew someone took her. I always knew she didn't walk away." The trial preparation began immediately. Prosecutors wanted a thorough reconstruction of the night Marina vanished. Knox revisited every point from 2004, treating them as if they were brand new. He returned to the river turnout where Marina's car had been found. Winter snow had long melted, and the landscape looked different, but the stillness remained. He stood at the spot where the car once sat, imagining how Pike might have arrived, how he might have pulled the car in, how he might have moved quickly. Knox revisited Marina's route from work lighting, traffic, visibility. In 2004, the streetlights were sparse. The road had long open stretches where a vehicle could follow another one unnoticed. Pike's cabin location matched one of the possible interception points. Prosecutors built their case around a chilling but logical theory. Pike had watched Marina before. Maybe he'd seen her at the fabric shop. Maybe he'd noticed her routine. Maybe he'd followed her home once or twice to learn her route. Then, on that cold November evening, he waited on a stretch of road with no witnesses, no lighting, and enough isolation for a fast abduction. For months leading to trial, investigators searched for more evidence linking Pike to Marina. They interviewed former co-workers, landlords, neighbors, and past employers. What emerged was a profile of a man who lived detached from the world. He avoided relationships. He avoided attention. He preferred quiet places. And he often insisted on using the same brand of marine. Rope for his odd jobs, rope identical to the fibers found in Marina's trunk, but the strongest piece came from a forensic detail that didn't mean much. In 2004, Marina had worn a wool scarf that night, a scarf she never separated from in cold weather. That scarf had never been found. Knox submitted the old fabric roll from the car for advanced textile particle examination, something unavailable at the time of the disappearance. Beneath the layers, embedded in one of the fibers, analysts found tiny strands of blue and white rope fibers, the same type as Pike's rope. It proved the rope had been in direct contact with something Marina carried. It meant Marina had been restrained. It meant she had been overpowered. It was the missing link that prosecutors needed during the months. Pike awaited trial. He stayed silent. No confession. No explanation. Not a single statement of remorse. When investigators questioned him, he simply stared ahead, expression flat, like someone observing clouds drift across the sky. Knox spent countless nights sifting through the case file, replaying the events, hoping for a breakthrough that would lead to Marina's remains. But despite multiple searches, drone scans, cadaver dogs, excavation of old trail routes, no trace of Marina surfaced. The winter of 2004 had been too harsh, and the terrain too vast. Time had swallowed the path. Still, prosecutors knew they had enough for trial. Courtroom seats filled months before opening arguments. Reporters from Salt Lake City and neighboring states arrived with cameras, notebooks, and questions about one of Utah's longest unsolved cases. Former neighbors who remembered Marina attended, wanting closure. Others came for Eldon, who sat quietly in the front row, expression steady, holding a small, hand-woven piece of fabric Marina had made for him when he was young. The trial lasted nearly 8 weeks. Jurors heard about the rope fibers, the boots, the indentation in the back seat, the timeline, the proximity, the abandoned cabin, and the new textile analysis. Expert witnesses explained how modern polymer testing allowed identification with a precision impossible in 2004. Detectives testified about Pike's movements, his radio silence in the community, his habit of disappearing when people asked questions. But the most emotional moment came when Eldon testified. He spoke about the night Marina disappeared. The unanswered calls, the fear, the years of waiting, the hope that kept fading and returning like a tide. He said, "She never left me without saying goodbye. Someone took her, and I never saw her again." His voice didn't break, but nearly everyone in the courtroom did. Pike's attorney offered an argument, claiming there was no direct physical link to Marina, but prosecutors dismantled it piece by piece. Technology had caught up, forensics had caught up, and Pike's silence told its own story. Closing arguments finished on a Friday afternoon. Jurors deliberated late into the night. When the verdict came the next morning, the courtroom fell silent. Garen Pike was found guilty, but the truth behind how Pike picked Marina, what happened in the moments after he intercepted her, and why he hid her body the darkest part of the story would only be revealed in the final part. The day of sentencing was bitterly cold. Utah's winter wind cut through the courthouse doors as survivors, reporters, and law enforcement officers filled the small lobby, each carrying their own mixture of anticipation, dread, and relief. Eldon Lowell arrived early, holding tightly to a photograph of Marina, the last clear image he had of his mother. Her smile seemed almost to glow against the cold sunlight streaming through the courthouse windows, a sharp contrast to the decades of uncertainty that had haunted him. Detective Adrian Knox sat quietly near the back, his notebook closed. He had spent countless hours poring over old evidence, revisiting the scene, reconstructing the night Marina disappeared. Every fiber, every footprint, every discarded item was a memory he carried. And now, finally, the weight of that 35-year-old case was nearing closure. Yet, he knew closure was relative. Marina's body had never been found, and the scars left behind would never fully heal. Garen Pike entered the courtroom in shackles, flanked by 2 officers. He was unremarkable to the casual observer, a thin man, his face lined with age, his hair grey, his eyes devoid of expression. Yet every person present could feel the darkness radiating from him. Pike had spent decades moving unnoticed, a ghost in his own life, and now he faced the full weight of the law. He walked with a calculated calm, eyes scanning the courtroom as if measuring every human reaction, every flicker of emotion. Before sitting at the defense table, the district attorney began with a chilling reconstruction of that November night in 2004. Prosecutors detailed how Pike had monitored Marina's routine, tracking her from work to the car, how he intercepted her along the dimly lit back roads, and how he had used his knowledge of isolated areas to commit the abduction without witnesses. Every piece of evidence, collected boots, rope fibers, cabin proximity, and the scarf with its embedded traces painted the same terrifying picture. A predator, meticulous in planning and patient in execution. Jurors were shown forensic images of the rope fibers found on the scarf, the microscopic indentations on the car seat, and the boot tread patterns, each analyzed with precision. Experts testified about how even a small oversight in Pike's movements created a digital and physical trail, which, thanks to modern forensic methods, now linked him undeniably to Marina's disappearance. The room was silent as these details unfolded, a collective shiver moving through the audience. The most harrowing testimony came from Eldon. His voice was steady, but the anguish behind his eyes was palpable. He spoke of nights lying awake, imagining Marina's last moments, thinking about the warmth of her hug, the sound of her laughter, and the stories she had told him when he was just a boy. He recounted the pain of birthdays, holidays, and graduations without her presence, the void her absence created in a life that should have been filled with her guidance and love. He paused, gripping the photograph, and said, "I always hoped she would walk through the door. I hoped for years she had found her way home. Now I know she didn't, and it breaks my heart." Knox watched silently, reflecting on how the investigation had grown over the years. At first, it had been almost impossibly lost leads, degraded evidence, and a trail that had grown cold. But modern forensic advancements and a relentless pursuit of truth had brought Pike to justice. Knox recalled the breakthrough moment in 2018, when advancements in DNA amplification allowed fibers to be tested in ways that had been impossible 14 years earlier. The fibers from the scarf, combined with analysis of the boots and cabin traces, created a chain linking Pike directly to Marina. During the sentencing, Pike showed no emotion. He did not flinch as the judge described the gravity of his crimes, did not speak when given the opportunity, and did not offer remorse. It was as though the decades of evasion had made him untouchable in his mind, but reality had finally caught up. The judge outlined Pike's pattern of predatory behavior, his deliberate planning, and the enduring impact on the Lowell family. This court must acknowledge not only the cruelty of the crime itself, but the decades of fear, grief, and uncertainty inflicted upon a family who deserved answers, she said. The sentence was life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. Every member of the Lowell family felt the weight of relief and sorrow simultaneously. The law had recognized Pike's responsibility, but it could not return Marina or erase the years lost to uncertainty. Eldon whispered a quiet, almost imperceptible, "It's over," though the word felt hollow against the magnitude of what had been taken. Yet, even as the courthouse emptied, Knox knew the investigation was not entirely closed. Searches continued along the wooded trails near the old cabin. Advanced cadaver dogs, ground-penetrating radar, and volunteers combed areas that Pike had once frequented. The hope was to locate Marina's remains, to provide a tangible place for remembrance and mourning. Every brush of dirt unearthed, every sweep of radar, carried the potential for closure, the promise of truth after decades of absence. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed. Residents of Wasatch County spoke of the haunting nature of Pike's crimes, how a man could integrate into society unnoticed while harboring such darkness. Marina's co-workers remembered her as vibrant, loving, and full of energy. Neighbors recalled a young woman who always greeted everyone with a smile. And now they were forced to reconcile those memories with the horror of Pike's actions. For Knox, the case had become more than just a pursuit of justice. It was a study in human behavior, the psychology of a predator, and the resilience of a family left behind. Pike had been methodical, careful, and utterly remorseless, chilling reminder of how violence can exist hidden within seemingly ordinary lives. Knox reflected on the lessons learned, the importance of preserving evidence, the value of modern forensic science, and the enduring power of persistence. Without it, Pike might have remained free, his crime unpunished. His victim never acknowledged, Eldon began working with a local advocacy group, sharing his story to help families of missing persons navigate uncertainty. He spoke at conferences, contributed to legislation improving cold case investigations, and ensured that Marina's story would not be forgotten. In her absence, Marina became a symbol of hope, of persistence, and of the need for justice no matter how much time had passed. The Lowell family planted a memorial tree near their home. Each year, Eldon would visit, leaving fresh flowers and small tokens that reminded him of Marina. The act was quiet, private, and deeply emotional. The community rallied behind them, understanding that while Pike had been captured, the ripple effects of his actions had touched every corner of their lives. Ultimately, the Utah 2004 cold case was a testament to the relentless pursuit of truth. For 35 years, Marina Lowell's disappearance haunted a family, a community, and a generation of investigators. Her killer, Garen Pike, was finally held accountable. But the story also highlighted the fragility of life, the persistence of memory, and the extraordinary lengths to which some families must go to reclaim justice. Detective Knox summarized it best during a small memorial service months after the trial. Standing before Marina's photograph, he said, "We cannot bring Marina back, but we can honor her by making sure her story is told, her name remembered, and her killer held responsible. Justice is never perfect, but sometimes, after decades of darkness, it arrives." The case became a benchmark in Utah law enforcement circles, the symbol of how cold cases, once deemed unsolvable, could be resurrected through determination, advances in forensic science, and the courage of families who never gave up. It inspired protocols for evidence preservation, forensic training, and DNA amplification that would go on to solve other long cold cases, ensuring that Marina Lowell's tragic story had an enduring impact far beyond Wasatch County. Though her physical presence was gone, Marina's legacy was cemented. In every investigative training, every cold case workshop, every remembrance ceremony, her story became a teaching tool, a cautionary tale, and a symbol of hope. For Eldon, each day was still tinged with sadness, but also with purpose. Through the darkest of tragedies, he had found a path to resilience, using his mother's memory to fight for others, and so the Utah 2004 cold case concluded its, ending bitter yet necessary. A long overdue reckoning for Garen Pike, a measure of peace for the Lowell family, and a chilling reminder of the human capacity for both evil and perseverance.